the things that I think challenges so many people emotionally is we are bombarded with information about good, bad food, about which diet works, about carbs being good and bad, or fat being good and bad. And it gets really complicated and confusing because, like you just said, which I highlight all the time in my office, we are all different. And really understanding and working with what your body needs and what balances of food and energy work for you, whether that is being a vegetarian, being a vegan, being a meat eater. To me, there's not one right fix for everybody. And yet, we often read information all over online, on the internet, in books that make it confusing, thinking that there would be one right answer for the way that we eat.
Yeah, so noticing what works with your system might be a good way to prevent hangry from happening or the dip in the blood sugar. I notice this is true for my system, and then being able to practice that. I think that'd probably be a pretty good preventative method for hangry. What about a mindset preventative strategy that you would suggest for people who find themselves being hangry?
Yes, I would say that the biggest preventative strategy that I would notice applying to all people would be there is some foundational good information about nutrition and using that foundational information to help with your mood state. And one of the best ways to keep a balanced blood sugar throughout the day, which also would keep the most balance in your mood and your hangriness or your feeling of chaotic. So the best way to think about keeping yourself in optimal balance to make sure that in our meals and when we are eating food that we are balancing carbohydrates with some sort of fat with some sort of protein. So that combination of ingredients in food is what will help to keep a blood sugar the most regulated and on track.
Could you give us an example about the protein, fat, and carb combination when you're not on the go, and then a good example of a protein, fat, carb combination when you're on the go? Because I know a lot of people are traveling around and or don't have time to just stop and have a formal meal. But if you have some suggestions of the types of foods that people will eat with a good balance of protein, carbs, and fats, that would be really helpful, I think.
Yes, let's say not on the go. If I was helping a parent, for example, to work with their kid before they go to school, oftentimes kids tell me, I want to have a bagel or a Pop Tart or cereal or some sort of like donut pastry type food. So all of those foods to me fall in the carbohydrate category. And
Mhm.
I tend to not want to tell someone, don't have that. I say, how about if we have less of that and then we combine that with a fat and a protein, which protein could be some sort of meat for sure, could be bacon, could be sausage, but it also could be some sort of non meat, which could be peanut butter, which could be cottage cheese, which could be nuts, and then some sort of fat, which could be butter, which could be, again, some of those nuts and seeds, and peanut butter is a good example. So if somebody was telling me they were having a bagel, in fact, I had someone in my office. He told me he liked to have the big Costco sized bagel, and that was it for breakfast. This was a kid. And I thought, that's a whole lot of carbohydrate, and it's going to throw him out of balance by the time he gets to school. And he was wanting to eat more snacks pretty quickly. And I thought, what if we have half the bagel, and then on the bagel, we put peanut butter, which would be a great fat and protein combination, or we have half a bagel with peanut butter and a hard boiled egg for protein, or a
Yeah.
slice of bacon. So, some way to just get the body regulating the blood sugar better is adding those fats and proteins. People don't usually have too much of a problem finding the carb source because we have so many carbs. They have trouble sometimes adding in the proteins and the fats.
For sure. And I know with our work in treating eating disorders, that comes into play quite a bit as far as people are afraid of those proteins and especially afraid of the fat because they are afraid of gaining weight. How are
Mhm.
you able to address those sorts of issues in your office when people are like, well, I don't want to put peanut butter on my bagel because it's going to make me fat?
I use that same sort of concept with them. And in fact, there's another interesting truth about food that people don't realize is typically the fat on our body is in the form of a triglyceride fat, which is three triglycerides, which is three carbohydrates essentially, is what makes a triglyceride fat that we would store on our body. So I try and help a person with an eating disorder to realize that fat in a food form, like an avocado or in oil, is not necessarily what gets translated into fat on your body, but that's not actually how your body functions. Your body actually takes excess carbohydrates, like that extra half of a bagel, is what gets converted into a triglyceride and turned into fat. It's not the fat from the avocado that I turn into triglyceride fat on my body. So first I try and break some of the myth ideas that they have about what food is. And then I try and help them to understand that because that there's some things that they have come to believe that are not actually true about the way food works and the way that they feel and what we need fat and protein for our mood regulation and feeling better and emotional stability. Give it a try with experimenting with some of these different things and see that the result is not what that you expect that it might be.
Yeah, I appreciate you saying that about the fat on our body does not equal the fat in our food. And I'm sure you probably have a drawing for that too, as well. I would love to see that. And so, if you are hangry and you're noticing that you are, and say you're on the go and you find yourself to be hangry or even hungry or out of balance, is there something that would be good to be able to eat to balance that out right away? I'm kind of thinking about what you do with diabetics when they crash
Yeah.
or when something
Yeah.
happens. What do you give them? And so maybe I'll have to modify my snack box that I have in my office. But yeah, what are some ideas to be able to quickly balance that out?
Yeah, that's a great question. In fact, a lot of times when I have people who are struggling with the after work food issue that they have where they can't make it home to have dinner because they're so hungry by the end of the day, that's a common time where they stop for fast food or do something else that they're trying to work on not doing as much. I often suggest that people keep their own snacks and sort of on the go items in their car or in their desk, or if they have children where that's an issue, that they keep them in their purse. And so some of the items that I would suggest really have this sort of I have my hands in like a little triangle right now, and I'm thinking, yeah, it's kind of like that. It's like there's three different parts that I want to make sure that I'm thinking about when I'm having some kind of snack to get me regulated. And that's this protein, fat, and carb combination. So the biggest things that I would say is don't have just a carb, don't have just a bag of chips. Sticking with things that are nuts are a great one because nuts have a combination on their own of fat, protein, and carbs. So some foods are just built that way. They just not beans also. One of the things I'm really into now is these dried chickpeas. So if somebody's not a meat eater, they can have beans, hummus, and those sorts of snacks. And now they make a lot of I don't necessarily love our portable food industry because we do create a lot of waste that way. But when we're thinking about on the go health, I realize that in our fast paced sort of society, the way that things go, I would rather have someone have the snacks that will help them with these blood sugar and mood regulation than not have them. And then eventually get to a place where if they want to make their own hummus, for example. There are a lot of portable snacks now that are prepackaged that will help people to have in an emergency on the go situation or for their kids. One of them is these pre-containered hummus cups, and then there's pre-made guacamole cups, and often they have a better shelf stability in life.
Mm.
There's little bags of nuts. I was saying dried chickpeas is another good idea because they are high protein. There's a lot of high protein type snack bars, so kind bars, things that have nuts in them, or at least a good amount of protein content So not just a traditional granola bar with a lot of sugar, but
Mm.
a bar that has some nuts and things like that. There's prepackaged peanut butter cups. We do a lot of like cut up celery and carrots to go with those things. But again, maybe somebody wants things that they don't have to freshen up every day. So
Yeah.
it's good to have some of those sort of like non perishable things in a snack bag for the emergency situation. And if somebody's not someone that overconsumes nuts, that's usually a really good deal with hangry in the moment solution.
Yeah, I remember hearing about the diabetic situation that they fed them peanut butter and orange juice or something like that to get their blood sugar up right away.
Mhm.
And so I like your ideas and your suggestions. Sure, it does take some preparation to have the stuff on hand, but if you want to be more focused, if you want to be able to track what's going on, not feel like you're being aggressive to somebody, possibly
Mhm.
being able to prevent hangry from happening, then these sorts of things would be great to have on hand.
Mhm.